Hello, y'all, and welcome to the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name's Greg Paige. I'm the Director of Horticulture here, and we get to talk about something today that's probably my favorite group of plants on the planet. And that's saying something because there's a lot of them, and it's Magnolias today. And true to the definition of Arboretum, we are in probably our most collection-centric part of the Arboretum today. We're in the Magnolia collection. And right now, they are really getting their legs underneath them. Probably this week, most of the deciduous ones will be peaking. So if you are as enthusiastic as I am, or if you are wanting to be a so-called Magnolia lover, get down here soon to see them because they are absolutely beautiful. We've got perfect weather for them. It's supposed to be kind of warm with cool nights, which makes the blooms last longer. So now is the time to come. We're in the early part of March right now. We're actually a few weeks late for this time of bloom for our deciduous ones, but we have magnolias that bloom from late winter on into late spring, and then all the evergreen magnolias kick in. So there'll be a flavor of magnolia to see for quite a long time. So definitely need to come check it out at some point. In the theme of an arboretum and the definition of being a collection of plants, this is our most plant-centric collection probably on the property, our Magnolia collection. We are a part of a group with the American Public Garden Association, the Plant Collection Network, and we are in a group of fellow gardeners that share germplasm, both with cultivars and also help with some collecting of those. And we have a lot of those represented in our collection and continue to do that. So be great if you could join me on a tour to look at some of my favorites that are blooming right now. And we'll start that here in just a second. I mentioned earlier that we've got a pretty big collection of magnolias here, and most of what I'm going to focus on today are the deciduous ones, the ones that lose their leaves every year. But not to be underestimated or underappreciated are our evergreens. We've got one of the better collections of evergreens that I'm aware of here as well, and we'll see a couple of those near the end. But one of the first ones I want to talk about today, this is Magnolia loebneri, and it's a cultivar called Ballerina. I like the loebneri cultivars a lot because they're crossed between Magnolia cobus and Magnolia stellata. Stellata is a star magnolia, and you see that in the flower. Cobus has that similar flower, but usually has kind of a nice kind of oval shape to it, a little bit bigger than most of the stellatas. So you get the best of both worlds with that parentage. This is a sentimental favorite. I had this in my garden in Charlotte. This was always one of the first of the loebneris to bloom for me. And I've heard two different things about why it gets that name, Ballerina. One is the delicate nature of the flower, and it has lots of sepals, which some of the loebneris aren't quite as foliferous or full as that. And if you look at the buds when they first start to emerge, that looks just like a ballerina slipper. I don't know if that's fact or fiction or something that's in my head, but I really, really like that. At least that's how I remember the cultivar over the years. But I really like the loebneris. I like the bigger size. I like the impact they make with all this color and flower. Some of them are a little bit fragrant, but I wanted to start off with this one because it is a sentimental favorite. We have another Magnolia loebneri cultivar here, and one of the things to think about with magnolias are some of the culture requirements that they need. If you want kind of show-stopping flowers, you're going to need more sun. They can take a certain amount of shade, and our collection is fairly shaded because there's a lot of mature trees around it, and it still flowers pretty heavily. But if you look at some of the areas where the ones are the most covered with flowers, for obvious reasons, they're getting a whole lot more sun. Magnolias have a very kind of primitive fleshy root system, so that lends itself to needing kind of moist, well-drained soil. Really important to mulch them every year so that root zone is covered and helps preserve the moisture. We don't really fertilize ours. That's really not anything that I've ever had to worry about. And I'm going to harken back to do a soil test to figure that stuff out. But moist, well-drained soil, they do best. They can take a little bit of clay, but good garden soil is how they better perform. And that's pretty much across the board for most magnolias. When you get into some of the evergreens, like the sweet bays, there's some different soil conditions that they can handle. But the deciduous ones, good organic matter, moist, well drained, and they're going to be happy. Don't disturb the root zone. So the one above me kind of shows the color range of the Leonard Messels, and this is Leonard Messel, Magnolia loebneri Leonard Messel. This one has a lot more pink in the flower, and that's why I particularly like this one. This one's pretty common and easy to find in the trade because of that really nice pink coloration. And I think as the flowers open, most of that pink is on the back side and the center rib of the tepals, but that color kind of darkens as the flowers get older. So you go through a little bit of color range with this one. Another thing that I failed to mention in the first one, even when they're not in flower, I really like the bud interest with those very fuzzy buds. I'm a big advocate of winter, spring, summer, fall interest, and I think Magnolias fit into that very well. They have nice texture, not a lot of fall color to preach about, but the buds in the winter and the spectacular flowers, they definitely earn their keep in any garden. And there's a size and flavor for pretty much anybody. And we'll continue to look at some of those as we walk through the collection. So this is a Magnolia stellata cultivar. And I mentioned the loebneri, one of the parents is stellata, the star magnolia. And this is an Arboretum favorite, probably among everybody that works here. This one is called Scented Silver. It's a Frank Gallion hybrid, and hence the name. The flowers are almost silver. They're so white and intense. And in the morning, early morning light, you really get a better sense of that, the way the sun kind of captures the light off the tepals. About as pure white as you can get. The little sexual parts of the flower are kind of a nice pink inside. But unfortunately, Blake left the smell-o-vision attachment to the camera in the office. You can't smell this, but it's all-consuming and overwhelming standing underneath it. Quite intoxicating, very, very fragrant, and not in a bad way. Sometimes flowers can be too much. This is just, in the theme of the Three Bears, this is just right. Smells absolutely fantastic. That's a good question. How to best describe the scents and put some poetics in there somewhere. Some of my fondest memories of visiting gardens, and in particular Magnolia collections, is that fragrance. A lot of the gardens I've visited when they're flowering, it's in that time of the year when it hasn't decided if it's going to be cold or warm. Typically it's cloudy and gloomy, and you step into the garden and here's all this color and pomp and circumstance of the flowers. And then, some of them smell really, really good too. And it just kind of fills the air. And you almost kind of get punch drunk with it. You know, I can remember walking through the collection of the garden took care of in Charlotte with the director of the lab at the time, and both of us couldn't stop taking pictures, couldn't stop talking about the colors and the smells, so much so that he lost his phone and his camera on that trip, left them under a plant somewhere. That's what they do to you, to me at least. And that's part of the magic that's kind of captured me with Magnolias. That and the group of people that kind of follow them, those two things in concert. But it's kind of hard to put your finger on it. There's a little bit of sweet kind of spiciness, a little bit of earthiness in there. If you've ever broken a branch on a magnolia, they kind of have a definite smell, almost like sassafras. Some of that's in there also. It's kind of hard to put a label or your finger on it because it's attached to so many things: the weather, the colors, the people you're walking through the garden with, the garden you're at, all those things. It's definitely a legal mood lifter for sure. I also like at this time of the year, the petals, the sepals start to fall down on the ground, almost like snow. But we've been commiserating on how to get more people to appreciate this, because it is kind of tucked back in the collection where you have to be a bit adventurous to get back here. So we'd like to get this, look for this in future plant carts. We're going to try to propagate this and have this one for sale. But one of my favorites of the star magnolias, Scented Silver, one that we all love and adore here. Most of it's done through cuttings. You can do some grafting, and Magnolia cobus is often a common rootstock to graft on if you are so talented or inclined. But most of my experience with propagating these has been with cuttings. Don't ask me the time of the year. I'm not the propagator. We have stronger people here that I lean on heavily for that, and lots of nursery folks and friends that also do that. But cuttings for this one is probably the easiest way to get that to go. And I'm going to say they're softwood cuttings. If I remember correctly, probably early summer when that new growth comes out. The next group that I want to talk about, and kind of in general, people are familiar with two types of deciduous magnolias, the star magnolia and the saucer magnolia. So the Magnolia stellata that we looked at, that's the star. This next one is one of the saucer magnolias. This is Magnolia X Solangeana, Pickard's opal, and they get that name saucer magnolia. The flower actually looks kind of like a saucer, or a chalice is the receptacle that it most looks like to me. Very, very cup-like. We were just remarking on how the fragrance of these is very, very perfumey, much more so than the stellatas and the loebneri. Very, very kind of sweet and nice. This one is Pickard's opal. And this comes from an English breeder named Amos Pinkard in Canterbury, England. And there's about 16 or 17 magnolias that he's bred. All of them have these great big flowers, very, very bright colors. And from a stature standpoint, they can get kind of big. 10 to 20 feet wide, 20 to 30 feet tall. The saucers in general need more space to kind of do their thing. Same cultural requirements, but probably the one that most people are familiar with is the saucer magnolia. If you talk to somebody that's not a plant person and you say saucer magnolia, they're going to know what you're talking about. Really, really good ones for more space, wide color range. I like this because when the buds are tight, you get that nice kind of purplish pink color. And as they open up and splay open, bright, bright white, and the inner parts of the flower have that pink that kind of carries over, and very, very nice contrast. If you want to take a close-up picture of a flower, this one does not disappoint because of all those different textures and colors that they get. I mean, there's been breeders, like Green Bay Botanic Garden has a great collection, and obviously those are cold hardy ones. And there's a lot of overlap because some of these were bred by those breeders. It's like growing degree days. We've had a lot of warmer days, so that's what insects trigger on when they're emerging, is the growing degree days, and flowers and leaves are the same exact thing. I was in here last week looking at stuff, nothing green on this barberry at all. And there's been enough growing degree days that started to kind of open up. So that's the thing that they're really looking at. The other side of that coin is how cold the winter temperatures are going to be. In terms of its actual hardiness. When the cold hits the flowers, that's not going to kill the tree. It's going to destroy those soft, fleshy petals, but it's not going to impact the tree. If it gets really cold, it might impact the leaf buds and future buds. And if it gets even colder than that, you might have actual stem dieback. And the kiss of death for a tree is you go through this warm weather like we're having, and then we have weather that dips way down, and you've got all that moisture in the tree. I think it was 2010, we had an Easter cold snap in Charlotte where it got down to like 19, and bark on trees actually came off because it froze and all those cells just literally exploded, and the bark just sloughed off on magnolias, on crepe myrtles, on maples, on all kinds of things. And it was like pockets where the cold was more inverted. So the cold hardiness, and I hate to promote cold hardy ones here because we're growing ones for our area, but that's where a lot of the Magnolia Society resources are really, really good. Some of the books that I mentioned in the talk that I did before list those cold hardy ones, or sending us an email and we can come up with ones that are. But there are quite a few actually. I know the Kerr hybrids, I think he was based out of Hendersonville, so he was looking at things that aren't quite as that are more cold hardy there than they need to be here. It's a long answer to that question. Who's next? So another saucer magnolia to show you. This one's a little bit different, a little bit smaller flower, not quite as braggadocious, but still very, very attractive. A lot more pinks and purples in it. This is Magnolia Excellengiana Sundew. This one 20 to 30 feet tall and about as wide, but this one's a little bit more narrow, more upright than some of the traditional Excellengianas. But you can see again that nice kind of saucer-like flower. And we were talking in between things about cold hardiness of things, and people always ask, what day of the month will these things open up? And there's no way to predict that. Plants and insects and other animals rely on a certain number of days that are above a certain temperature, growing degree days, before things will kind of open up and do their thing. So this one's already starting to open up its leaf buds, which always makes me a little bit nervous that we might get a cold snap. People also always ask me that if the flowers get damaged, is that going to damage the plant? And usually it doesn't. If these leaves get damaged, that might stress things out, but we're holding out for hope that we've seen the last of the super cold weather. But magnolias are very susceptible, the flowers, to the changes in our climate, the ups and downs, the swings that we have. And that's why we're out here today and saying to come and enjoy them, because it is a very fleeting thing in most seasons. But one of our favorites of the Excellengianas here, right at the edge of the collection, and also has that nice perfumey fragrance. And I talked about earlier the parents of the loebneri cultivars, stellata and denudata. Behind me is a denudata cultivar. This is Magnolia denudata forest pink. I really like that species because it's typically a later bloomer, nice big oval shape. There's a couple of ones that I love at Garden. There's one down in the Delaware Valley at Winter Museum and Gardens in their shrub garden. That's the most beautiful denudata I've ever seen. Another nice one at Swarthmore College, but I really like that species. And this is one that I like to use to highlight those big, fat, kind of fleshy flower buds with that tomentose covering on them that helps protect them from insects and from the swinging cold temperatures. But this to me has a lot of winter interest. And standing here looking up at it and watching the light shine down through them, it's very, very attractive, especially in the wintertime when things are kind of glum. There's not a lot to look at, but you really have to have a sharp eye and a good imagination to pick things out for winter interest. And I love the buds on magnolias. It's a pretty consistent straight in the deciduous ones, that they have this nice kind of fuzzy bud to them. And this is one that really highlights that. So we're in the White Garden, and true to that name, the magnolia behind me is in all of its glory, sharing its big white flowers with us. This is my favorite magnolia in this garden because of the size, the spectacle of the flowers that you get. This is Magnolia X loebneri. This is Merrill, the cultivar Merrill. This one is known to have lots of sepals, up to 17, 18. So very, very heavy flowers. But this is where you can really see that Magnolia denudata parentage, the big, broad silver trunks, the nice kind of oval shape, but the openness of a stellata. This one frames this garden very, very well. And just the cascade of petals that are on the ground really, really add to that textural element of it. And it's almost like it's snowing in here when they're dropping. But a perfect example of a plant working within the theme of its garden, and a perennial favorite of ours that's really doing its thing right now. So this is one of the yellows, and for obvious reasons, it's also a very popular one here among folks at the Arboretum. The yellow ones typically are a little bit later blooming, and this is a complex cross from the late Phil Savage, who was a breeder in Michigan and did a lot of work on cold hardiness. So this one is a cold hardy one, hence it opens up a little bit later in the season. Ours is in a really kind of bright sunny spot. It gets a lot of reflected heat from the path. It's in full sun, so it usually opens a little bit earlier than traditionally it would. A lot of the yellow ones are bred with Magnolia acuminata, the cucumber magnolia. If you've ever seen the flower of the cucumber magnolia, it's bright yellow and has kind of that upright kind of chalice, almost tulip shape to it. It's also, cucumber magnolia is sometimes called tulip tree, which is not what it is, but it does have a very tulip-shaped flower, and a lot of the yellows kind of adopt that shape with the acuminata. The other thing about acuminata is those tepals can be kind of thick and fleshy. You see that in some of the yellows like butterflies. This one is kind of that same way too, but yellow is a hard color to kind of find in the magnolia world, and that's why we really, really like this one. Kind of upright, oval shaped, about as wide as it is tall, sometimes a little bit more narrow. We've not pruned ours or anything like that. Same cultural requirements with moist, well-drained soil. We're due to mulch this one, and they really thrive in conditions where they get that nice, rich kind of organic matter. But one of our favorites of the yellows, because it's one of the first ones to open up, this is Magnolia X Goldfinch. So we're standing in front of one of the evergreen crosses that's a super early bloomer. This is Magnolia Eternal Spring. It's a cross between Magnolia laevifolia and Magnolia maudii, and this comes from our friends at Camellia Forest Nursery. David Parks, and I think maybe his father is the one that developed this one. This is an early spring bloomer for an evergreen. It has that maudii in it. We've got some around the property that are going full guns. This is a little bit more refined than maudii, smaller foliage, nice dark green, and a whole succession of white flower blooms that are unbelievably fragrant. Almost as fragrant as scented silver, but again, absolutely intoxicating. This is one that's a little bit more diminutive in size, so it serves itself well for the home garden. It's pretty cold tolerant. It can take those deep swings. Sometimes the early flowers will get hit, but there's always a long succession of bloom, of buds all along the stems that haven't quite opened yet that will continue to open into late spring. This is a long bloomer with that fragrance that adds to it. It's one of those plants that you'll walk by or you'll smell it from a distance and follow your nose to the actual plant. But one of my favorites for that kind of interest that captivates all the senses kind of at the same time. Welcome back to the J.C. Raulston Arboretum Magnolia Collection. We are a week out from the last time that we spoke and met here, and we've had really good weather to keep the consistency of color and keep the evil frost demons away from damaging the beautiful flowers. So to say it's been a spectacular bloom year is a bit of an understatement. They are going full guns, but it's amazing the ephemeral nature of them. Ones that we looked at just last week have started to leaf out. Most of the petals are on the ground at this point, but there's a whole succession of ones that are blooming now and slowly opening, which extends that bloom season for us that I really, really like about our collection. So a couple that I want to talk about to begin with are some of the Gresham hybrids. Todd Gresham was a very famous breeder in California in the 50s, and he bred a lot of magnolias that kind of bloomed past that last blast of frost, so that you would have that nice succession of bloom after any kind of threat of the weather disturbing that. His typically also are kind of big, bold, shall I even say bodacious flowers that are very, very large. Some of them are fragrant, but I really, really like the Gresham hybrids because of that big lushness of bloom. The one above me is one called Magnolia Winelight, and it's one of the truly late flowering ones, known for its very, very large flowers and for that long succession of bloom and missing that last opportunity of frost. But very much the ones we have here kind of represent the mature growth. These are about as big as they're going to get, a little bit taller than wide, more kind of upright, but a really, really strong performer for us, and ones that I really like to promote. Another Gresham hybrid right next door. This is Magnolia John John, and this one has even bigger flowers than Wine Light. When they're open, they're almost 6 to 8, sometimes 12 inches across. That's a big, monstrous flower, and I love the white petals at the top and kind of a purplish pink throat to them. And when they open up, you get all those colors at once. And this one, to me, is a little bit fragrant. It's not knock your socks off, overpowering like some of the ones we looked at last week, but it has a definite nice fragrance to it and exhibiting all those really nice characteristics of the Gresham hybrids that I like so much. So we've left the proper collection, or the collection proper, and we're standing in the about the middle way of the perennial border. And the nice thing I like about our collection is, yes, we have a core collection area, but we've got them to enjoy kind of scattered all throughout the garden, which I think works well. And to me, that's always the best use of using a magnolia in the landscape, is having them be a part of, incorporated in, and carrying that succession of bloom. And that's very much the theme of the perennial border. So the one that's right behind me is one that fits well into that. This is Magnolia Yellow Fever. It is a very vigorous bloomer of the yellow hybrids, and it's a cross between acuminata, which is cucumber magnolia, and Magnolia denudata. And if you remember, when we last met, I talked about denudata, that kind of nice oval form, and you definitely see that with this one right here. To me, that's like the true form of denudata, that kind of nice oval branching all the way to the ground. In this case, it's working around its neighbors and has reached that plateau and is sharing its flowers with us above the hedge behind me. But it's a precocious yellow bloomer. It's just kind of getting started now. So this is one that definitely, usually under the best of circumstances, will kind of bypass any late frost that you might have, which to me makes the yellows among my favorites, because they bloom usually well after the threat of frost has kind of come in. These flowers are a true yellow, and in the light that we have today, it kind of masks some of that color. One of the yellows, Goldfinch, that we talked about last year, to me looks better when it's a little bit overcast. Same with this one. That color really stands out when it's like perfect photography weather. But to me, this is a really strong yellow. It also has a big yellow flower, which I like. One of the first ones of these that I ever saw was at a garden in St. Louis, and it instantly struck me how gorgeous that yellow flower was, and just the size of it, 6 to 8 inches. That's a big magnolia flower. And this one is also fragrant too. Unfortunately, most of those flowers aren't at nose level, but I can rest assured that it is a fragrant one, and among one of my favorites, Yellow Fever. So last week, this was one of my favorites, and they seem to all be my favorites. But this is an evergreen one called Eternal Spring from our good friends at Camellia Forest Nursery. And true to its name, it is eternally blooming. I don't know when it started. It was probably late February, so it's been blooming for at least a solid month now. And again, I apologize profusely. We left the smell-o-vision back in the McSwain building. It's powerful. I mean, it smells really, really good, super fragrant. It's perfuming all the air around us. But when I talk about succession of bloom, something that repeats blooming, that has a long cascade of flowers, this one, because it blooms early, often the first soldiers will get hit by the cold, but there's a lot more in reserve waiting to pop out and do their thing. And this plant is definitely, just looking up at the top of it, there are some that still aren't open. So if we have this nice kind of consistent cool nights, nighttime temperatures, this thing will keep on blooming for a while. I'm not going to promise it'll be into April for Raulston blooms, but it looks like it's going to, continue for quite a while. So Eternal Spring, right near our lath house, an evergreen that's just a really good precocious bloomer. Continuing our theme of later blooming deciduous magnolias, this is another yellow that I offer all of you. This is Magnolia Legend, and this one has some history with me from a public horticulture standpoint. This is from a breeder named David Leach, who was a very well-known rhododendron breeder in northeastern Ohio, associated with the Holden Arboretum. I was lucky enough to have met him when I worked there a whole 30 plus years ago, and got to see some of his initial work on some of he did a lot of the breeding with yellows. And what he was looking for, if any of you are from or have been to northeastern Ohio, it gets a little bit colder there than it does here. So he was really looking for deciduous magnolias that could get through their very extended winter and early spring and produce nice flowers. And he was very interested in yellow flowers. So Legend was born out of his crafty hands and brain. And this is one that I'm lucky enough to drive by coming into work every morning. And about 7 o'clock this morning, it looked like it was plugged in. It was absolutely glowing, but just a really nice yellow, very consistent. To me, it's one of the, next to butterflies, which is a true buttery yellow, this one really stands out as having a dark yellow color. This one is also fragrant. And again, a lot of the flowers are up high, not at nose level, but this one is very fragrant, kind of a lemony, very traditional magnolia smell to it. But off the beaten path, not in the collection proper. If you're coming up Barrel Road to come to the Arboretum, this one's going to catch your eye. Be sure you stay on the road. You don't go off or into the cars in front of you, or slow down as I did this morning to maybe shoot a picture out the window, but was met with some very rude beeping of the horn to continue coming into work. So be careful when you're coming in to see this one. One of my favorites of the yellows, Magnolia Legend. I rolled the window down and I was like trying to get my camera, and somebody was coming pretty quick and I got a toot toot. So we've moved further into the garden. We're actually really close to the boxwood circle. And I'm going to give a plug for this part of the Arboretum. It's one of my favorites because it's kind of tucked in. You feel kind of enveloped by the plants. And with the addition of our new fence, I think it even enhances that more. So right along the fence, just up from our last one, this is one of the U.S. National Arboretum hybrid introductions. And they've done a lot of really good work on developing some really strong magnolias for the home landscape, thinking in mind of ones that are later blooming, ones that stay a little bit smaller, that do well in smaller landscapes, more kind of upright in nature. And this is a really, really good one. This is one called Galaxy. And we used to have one in front of the Necessary before the new roof went on, and we had to unfortunately remove it. So I'm glad that we had that one represented in the collection, because it's a really, really good hybrid. It's a little bit fragrant. Again, that nice lemony kind of magnolia smell to it. Touts it as being more upright and kind of narrow. Our collection of some of these is mature. So this is kind of a finished state. And I think it's taking advantage of the good soil that's up here, moist, well drained, really likes where it is. So it's spread out a little bit over time. But I really, really like this one. It's almost peaked at this point. The leaf buds has started to open with the warm afternoons that we've had, but the really cool temperatures that we've had at night, just kind of hovering above freezing and into the low 40s, have extended the bloom on this one and a lot of other ones. So worth a look, worth research if you like magnolias, looking at some of the National Arboretum ones. Again, this is Magnolia Galaxy. Moving through the garden even further, finding these big bright splashes of color in the garden this time of the year, and the yellows are gonna predominate because they are later blooming. And behind me is another really, really good yellow one from a different family of plant breeders. This one is Magnolia Lois, and this one comes from Brooklyn Botanic Garden in New York City, where Dr. Lola Corrington did a lot of work, and others there, on on breeding yellow magnolias. A lot of the ones that they worked on are truly a little bit smaller. They do better in landscapes. One of the parents of this one is Magnolia Elizabeth, which is a pretty common yellow one that you can find in the trade. That is also a really, really nice one. That also came from Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Butterflies is another one that is, to me, the brightest yellow, smaller in stature, but a whole host of really good magnolias have come out of Brooklyn Botanic Garden. And Lois is just started to kind of open up. When I left Friday, there wasn't any color at all. So it's just kind of started opening up with the warm weather that we had yesterday and today. And by the end of the week, it'll be completely full out and in bloom. And you really see the Magnolia acuminata in this one. Really, really stands out. But I wanted to really talk about the Brooklyn Botanic Garden ones because they've had such an impact on plants in horticulture and magnolias in particular. And again, this one is Magnolia Lois, a really, really good yellow one. A little bit more diminutive in nature and suits it better for smaller gardens. Wow. Almost makes you want to weep. So we've come kind of full circle with some of the different species of magnolias, and we're back looking at and visiting a saucer magnolia, Magnolia solangiana, and most of them are super early. They can get hit by those cold temperatures that I keep referring to, and the flowers look like saucers. They're big and kind of chalice shaped. This is Magnolia X solangiana, Lilliputian, and if you read the literature, which the plants don't tend to read, they say it's kind of more smaller in stature, and this one is smaller than some of the ones that we looked at today. I think some of that is it's really kind of tucked in here in the shade and has a lot of bigger things growing around it. But I think that the name comes from the diminutive flower, and that's a small flower for a saucer magnolia, for a Magnolia solangiana, and also just starting to open up. It'll be peak in a couple days. The leaf buds are starting to open up, but very, very small for a saucer magnolia. Very kind of typical coloration. You've got the white inside with the flashes of pink that run up the sepals. And this one is super fragrant, really, really nice smell. I really, really like this one. Just the name alone kind of makes you smile and conjures up images of children's books and other things. But I really like this small kind of diminutive flower. It speaks to the delicate nature of magnolia flowers, just with the size of it. And just the kind of the way that it kind of glows, but a really, really good one, and super duper fragrant. We are in Asian Valley now, and behind me is another one of the U.S. National Arboretum hybrids. This is Magnolia Spectrum. And this is a sister seedling to Galaxy, which we looked at just a little bit ago. The claim to fame for this one, and as you can see, the size of it, it's much, much bigger than Galaxy, and it also has a bigger flower. And the stark, sharp contrast is the flower is much darker, and it really, really stands out at this time of the day. And as it opens up, it's another one of those that kind of dodges the cold weather and the threat of being destroyed by a frost, but you need some room if you're going to grow this one in your collection. And I always kind of wonder as I'm walking around the garden if these things were planted by chance or just the neighbors, the color contrast and echoes kind of happen naturally. But I think it goes nicely with the Cercis Shibamichi Red right behind me. Those two colors work very well together. They're almost the same if you ask me, just a little more detail in the smaller flowers of the red bud. But I really, really like Spectrum a lot. My first love of magnolias probably started at the Scott Arboretum, and this was one that we always rotated to because of that really, really bright, large flower. A lot of the U.S. National Arboretum hybrids will begin flowering early, so you get flowers on a much younger plant. So Chef recommends U.S. National Arboretum selection of Magnolia Spectrum. So we've come to the bitter end, the final conclusion, the curtain call of 2 visits of our Magnolia collection here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. And we are kind of off the beaten path near the back gate that goes to our service entrance to a plant that we are all near and dear to because we walk by it literally hundreds of times a day and are always looking at it and evaluating it very harshly as we do here. And this is Magnolia Rosemary times Magnolia Genie. It's a hybrid between those two. And it comes from a long friend of the J.C. Raulston Arboretum, Bill Smith, a breeder who's no longer with us from Richmond, Virginia, who I met many years ago at my very first Magnolia Society meeting. Very kind with his knowledge and his plant material. Just a wonderful person to be around and help me catch the fever that I have for magnolias. Not something that's going to be super commercially available, but it's something that the flower is just spectacularly dark, particularly in bud before it opens up. Very dark purple, almost looks like tubes of lipstick coming out when it drops those coverings around the bud, and opening up to that really dark purple, and it fades to more of a pinkish before the petals eventually drop off. This is one that really waits till the bitter end to start doing its thing and opening up, and that's what we all here admire about it. Is it's a later blooming one, but nice that it's back here, that I get to spend time with it several times throughout my day. And that leads me to tell all of you to come visit us. We've got a great magnolia collection. It's a great way to kind of kick off spring, and it's definitely something that involves a repeat visit or two because these things bloom for a long period of time. So come out and check out our magnolias. Hello. Hope you enjoyed the Magnolia video. It was a lot of fun shooting that. Blake and I both agree wholeheartedly it was some of our best work, and which sets things up for more best work ahead. And I think what we're going to do is, are we going to take some questions? Is that what we're going to do?
Invite them to.
We would love to get some questions, and I think there's a couple queued up. There was one to start things off with is, where can you get these wonderful trees? Unfortunately, a lot of the nurseries that sell them are no longer around, but we do have some good local places. Camellia Forest is one. I know David Parks is a Magnolia fan, has always been a source in my past for getting them. And we cannot forget about Mr. Pat Kraken, who is one of the best magnolia breeders and growers of magnolias that I've ever encountered at Garden Treasures. That's another good source. And from a mail order perspective, I've been really good friends with the Goslers out in Eugene, Oregon of Gosler Nursery. And they've got a really good online catalog, and they're one of the last vestiges of nurseries that actually send out the paper ones, which are nice to kind of go through. I've got one on my desk actually, and they have a whole bunch of magnolias. I was out there not too long ago and got to run through the nursery with Roger. So those are three places that I would look for some. And also peruse your local garden center. I went to the new Logan's out by the farmer's market 2 weeks ago, and I don't know how it's possible, but it seems like they have a lot more stuff there now. But they had some magnolias that took me off track from my mission of planting some planter beds on my front porch. But check your local garden centers first. Try the two local sources of Camellia Forest and Garden Treasures. And it's a dangerous thing, but check out Gosler Nursery online. They've got tons of other things, not just magnolias.
And I'd say, for those of you here and those of you farther away, always go to your local garden centers. Yep. Because if they don't know you, they may not have it, but if you don't talk to them and tell them you want something, sometimes you have to create the demand.
Exactly.
And, you want to do that. And if you are local, check out our membership page. Members get discounts at several of the area garden centers, which is very generous of them, and it's a good deal for you too. So, if you become a member, that's fantastic. And membership is a big way to support us. We're both big Magnolia fans. I love them. Some of the early ones get hit early. What are some of your one or two of your favorite later deciduous flowering magnolias?
As I mentioned in the tour, I like the yellow ones because they tend to open up a little bit later, which is a good thing. There's Lois, who I talked about earlier. That one's still blooming really, really good. And another favorite that's blooming right now. I've got a flower I could show.
Yeah.
It's one called Woodsman, and this is a plant, a magnolia that some people don't like because it's got some different color ranges in it. It's got purples, pinks, and yellows kind of all at the same time. And this is one that I think is crossed with Liliflora and acuminata, which is a cucumber magnolia. This is a one from Brooklyn Botanic Garden that was bred many, many years ago. But I like that wide range of color in it. And this one has just opened up in the last couple of days. I've had my eye on it and was out of town, and I came running up here yesterday to take a peek and see how far along it was, but this is a favorite of mine. I like the name because it looks like something that you would stumble across in a nice, lovely woodsland, and I like all that range of colors on it. The flowers are very thick, so they're born upright, medium to, wouldn't call it a tall tree, medium growing, more upright than out, but this is a late bloomer, and I like the late bloomers.
Yeah. This was one of the early ones from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden breeding program.
Yes.
You know, I know we've talked about it, but one of my favorites that's out of that Brooklyn Botanic Garden breeding program was named for their director, Judy Zook. Yeah. Which I really like because it's later, like a lot of these yellows are, and it tends to be upright and a little bit narrower, so I can jam more plants into less space, which I like. And I love the Magnolias because they're easy to, while they have big leaves, the larger ones, you can really garden underneath them really well. And I'm glad you said that, because that's something that's often overlooked when people are planting their gardens. It's a good garden plant. We're kind of in the core collection, which is nice to have. But I also mentioned in the tour that we've got them kind of scattered through the garden, and I think that's important because you can kind of experience them kind of in those settings, which helps you kind of figure out a way you could do that in your own garden. Mm-hmm. It may be proximity bias for me, but one of my favorites here at the garden is Coral Lake because it's right outside my office.
That's a nice
so
one.
I can, some of the things that those of us who work in gardens, even though I'm in my office more than I wish, is we get to see plants as they progress through the season.
Yep.
And so that's why we always encourage people to visit this garden or other gardens often.
Yep.
And Coral Lake is a little bit later, but I get to watch it as it comes out, and I get to watch it throughout the day because its colors are a little more saturated than this, but it also has those multiple colors, and depending on the time of day, it's very pink or it's very yellow or it's very kind of peachy coral. Which is really neat to have, and that's why it's great to have them in your garden because you do get to watch the progression.
It's funny that you like that one. That was always my go-to one at my garden in Charlotte because it photographed well.
It does.
And I've got a bunch of those in talks, and we were talking earlier about people that can look at something and say, yeah, that's what that is. But anytime I would do a talk, at least one or two people would come up and say, was that Coral Lake you showed that opening shot? And it's like, yeah, Tom Rainey was one of those people that came up to me and asked me that one time. But it's a great one, and I like that multitude of colors that they have. And it blooms a little bit later, so it doesn't. It's an early bloomer, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, it's a little bit later. It doesn't usually get hit for us. We have just a ton of magnolias. And one of the things that we do here with all of our plants is really push, try different things. And magnolias can grow, depending on the type, across the U.S. Our native ones, native Magnolia virginiana, the Sweet Bay Magnolia goes from Canada to Florida.
Yep.
But we grow a lot of evergreen magnolias, which are a little bit different. Not our native, well, we do grow quite a few of our native ones, but some of the Asian ones, which a lot of the big collections of magnolias in the country can't grow.
Right.
We're a little bit warmer. And so something that people don't always know is that we are part of a bigger community, and we have a national collection of red buds, but we're also part of a national collection of a group of magnolia gardens with magnolia collections. They're all across the country, really.
Multi-site collection.
It's a multi-site collection. It's about 19 different collections, and really one of the areas where we hold collections that a lot of others don't are in some of these Asian evergreen ones. You see, you got a couple right here.
Yeah, Blake wanted to be sure I talked about our friend Eternal Spring again. All three of both of the videos that we did, it was blooming. It's still blooming its head off, and there's more buds on this that haven't even opened yet. Forgive us again, the smell-o-vision isn't working quite well today. We'll get that fixed next time we talk, but very, very fragrant. I absolutely love this plant because it just blooms for so long. And this one is Asian Valley. Kay's favorite? Gail's favorite. Gail's favorite. Yeah. Yes, we were talking about Kay earlier. This is Gail's favorite. This is growing in Asian Valley. Also extremely fragrant, not quite as showy, and a lot of the buds are kind of on the ones that open up around the ends. Has really fuzzy buds on it that I like a lot. I would call this kind of a small mounding evergreen form, and this one will bloom later, so it kind of avoids getting nailed by the frost.
And it's one of the more hardy of
one of the more hardy.
It's used in breeding quite a bit.
It is. This is Bill Smith introduction, a friend of ours from
Richmond.
I didn't even
realize that.
Yeah, but very fragrant.